Hello, welcome to the July 1st, 2025 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you could ask questions in the live chat field or simply ask questions via email. You can send an email in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running. So if you're running at the levels of Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, if you're running version 12, 13, or 14, and which operating system, that information is often helpful. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer a question in real time may soon be eclipsed depending upon the number of questions that are asked. We will go through all of the questions chronologically as they are asked. So if you don't see an answer to your question, you can just simply, if we could avoid repeating the same questions, that would be appreciated. And we should have an index of all the topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends. And if you wanted to search, and those will include timestamps, so you can quickly navigate to a particular section that covers a particular topic. And if you wanted to search for topics been covered in previous live streams, we've covered over 40,000 questions. You could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. We have two people that serve as moderators. We have Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees, but they do it to make it a better community experience. We'll give a special thanks to them. We also want to give an extra special thanks to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord. And that's a wonderful resource of information, kind of a compendium of tutorials and links and articles that's like very beneficial to the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And I'm presenting from the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you are watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always interesting to see people join in and ask questions throughout the whole world. One quick programming note, Friday is a holiday in the United States. It's the 4th of July, so we won't be having a live stream on the 4th of July as it is a holiday here. We don't get many in the United States, so try to take advantage of it. But we will be back next week with our regularly scheduled live streams, which will kind of start which occur on Tuesdays and Fridays starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. I believe today, so our holiday in the United States is for Independence Day, and I believe that today is Canada Day in Canada, so we want to wish a special Canada Day to our Canadian viewers. I think we've seen a couple already on. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and begin. All right, we see Peter joining from Montreal. We see Stefan from Sweden. Always wonderful to see Jazz Dude on. We see Jan from Cubase Index. All right, we have Uno Memento checking in from Finland. We have Vince Flyvey checking in from Winnipeg. All right, so we see Bratman Studio checking in from Uptown Whittier, California. His question is, can you speak to the two new updates, 14.031 and now you see 14.032 about a week later? Thanks. Yeah, so those were hotfixes. I think one of the hotfixes, and it might have been in 14.031, is if you had, and we had this question on some of the live streams as soon as 14.03 came out, that to kind of scroll with a control surface, like you could scroll the position forward but not backward, So instead of kind of waiting for a longer release cycle, because that could be extra annoying, Steinberg came out with hot fixes to resolve those particular issues quickly so that people could have their expected functionality. All right, so wonderful to see Ariane. We have Cornell, says it's never been so early, just checking in from the Netherlands. We have Tim K, also from the Netherlands, from Zeist, and his cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven, Mark Rabin's dog Stella, and other pets that are nearby. All right. Wonderful to see Soren checking in from Sweden. All right, we have Balsa checking in from Montenegro. All right, so see from Soren a question. Hi Greg, I got a playhead that freezes 0.1 second and skips forward all the time when I work in Cubase 14 Pro. Do you know what it can be fixed with? I didn't have it before. So let me know if it's with every project. So if you go to like a new project, so let's see if we like come here to a new project and we hit play. So if you have the behavior in kind of in an existing like an existing project or an empty project, sometimes if there is a lot of like audio performance usage, it could be, you know, that you may see a little kind of hiccup, like a little almost like skip ahead. So if you see this in an empty project as well as a project that has lots of plugins and instruments and audio tracks, then I would maybe think that it might be something to do with like a display driver issue. If it doesn't do it in the empty project, you know, also check to see if we go to your studio menu to studio setup and we select your audio interface here, go to the control panel. If you adjust the buffer size, if that makes a difference as well. If it's doing it in both an empty project and a project with lots of different elements in it, then I would lean towards the video driver. If it's only doing it in particular projects with a lot of information, a lot of data, a lot of audio performance happening, then I would try to increase the buffer size. So let me know how that works. All right, Rishab Saxena says, after I consolidate audio in Cubase, I can't use free warp anymore. Why does this happen? How can I fix it? So it could depend on how you're consolidating the audio, but if, let's say, for instance, if I'm here and I have a lot of different audio files, and let's say if, I'll just make this more obviously large. So as we kind of look at, let's say if we're doing our free warp, so we'll just switch to our free warp tool. All right, so when we do this and we have our warp markers, so let's say I just come here and we now have our warp markers. All right, so these warp markers are with this particular file. So if we choose to consolidate, and let's say if I just take these files and I go to bounce selection, what this is doing in essence is when we go to our free warp, this is a new audio file. So we're not going to see any of the warp markers that were there. So because this is the warp markers that are associated with this audio file, and when we come here, this has created a new distinct and separate audio file, kind of unique to the original file, and that's why you won't see the warp markers, because the warp markers are associated with the original file, not with newly consolidated file. So let me know if that makes sense, Rishab, for you, or if you're consolidating in a different manner. All right, always wonderful to see Jan from Cubase Index. We see Benny checking in from Sweden. Okay, so we see question, if I want to be able to mark anywhere in the project and start from there, how do I do that? All right, so I think if we just hold down, let's say if we have, if you hold down Control, Shift, so like if we're kind of coming along here, and we want to immediately, so if we just kind of click, there are a couple preferences. So one is if we go here to your preferences or settings and we go to transport, you could locate when clicked in an empty space. So if that's turned on and enabled, we could come right over here and this would move our playhead position based on where we click if it's an empty space. Now if there's an event, generally when we click on an event, we would select the event itself. But if we wanted to move the cursor directly to the spot, we could hold down the Control or Command plus the Shift key, and then we can just come over, or try the Alt or Option plus the Shift key. Then we could just navigate freely anywhere, whether we click on top of an event or if we click in an empty space. So while that's playing, I'll just pull up a project here just that doesn't have a bunch of stuff playing. So if I'm playing here, hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, and then we could click while it's playing and navigate as opposed to just clicking right here and selecting the event, Alt or Option plus Shift, and then we can click anywhere you want and move the playhead there. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Benny. Tim Cage is suggesting, just says, Captain Obvious suggests, don't blow yourselves up with fireworks. Yeah, so I like to watch my neighbors blow themselves up. So my next door neighbor kind of goes to 3 states away to spend a lot of money on fireworks. So, all right. I see Jazz Dude wishing our Canadian friends a happy Canada Day. Happy Canada Day. All right, so wonderful to see Tony Trunzo checking in from Australia. We have Jan Olav Smit just saying hi from the Netherlands. All right, Maxim Kozachyk asks, hey Greg, I have a question. Is it possible to duplicate individual MIDI notes with a step of the selected range? The range selection tool allows for duplicating all notes but not individual ones. So yeah, it's going to be designed more for the entire range as opposed to like the range selection working in conjunction with just single notes. So if we come over, just to kind of show this, if we so if we wanted to duplicate like this particular range, let me just take my snap off here. So we can't necessarily just duplicate individual notes within that range. It's going to be everything within that particular range. So now if we come over here, we could just, make our duplicates, but it's not going to be where we could select just like the range tool is going to be, for the range. But so it doesn't do it for an individual note. It'll do it for all of the events that actually occur within that defined range. All right, wonderful to see Parabot 2 checking in, I believe from Australia, if memory serves. All right, Dallas LaRue asks, I have an instrument track that I can hear when the song is played. It's a duplicate of a track in the song, but when that track is muted, I can still hear it. I can't find it anywhere. Okay. So what I would do in this scenario, I'm not sure if any of the tracks have been hidden from the project. So if we select, if we look on our inspector here and go to visibility, make sure that like you don't have some tracks that are hidden. You know, and sometimes, you know, so if you can't find the particular event, you know, what you can do is, you know, like let's say, you know, is just kind of mute different groups of tracks. So let's say, okay, I want to come here, I want to mute these and see if, as you're muting them, if they show up. But if you can't find a track, make sure that if it's a instrument track, it should kind of show up here, but it, you know, make sure that it's not a MIDI track and the MIDI track is routed to a particular instrument. But just check right here in the inspector into visibility and make sure that all the tracks are visible and that maybe one of the tracks had gotten hidden accidentally. And then you could just make sure, so if you see a check mark, that track is visible, and just kind of come over and you could just check the track visibility like so. All right, wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. Just says, thanks, Greg, and Cubase friends, grateful for all your help. And Uno Momento wants people to whack the like button. All right, we have Horacio Reisnick checking in from Buenos Aires, Argentina. Thanks for joining us today. All right, Balsa just says, question, how to copy and insert effects with its automation lanes to another track. Okay, so I don't think that there's a one-step process for this because if we have, let's come over here and so because the, you know, the inserts are at the track or kind of on the mixer, and then automation is on another track. So let's say if I duplicate, I'll duplicate this track here. So let's say we're going to solo this track, and let's open up a insert and automate it. All right. All right, so let's say we have that. So now the tricky thing is, you know, the automation kind of works in, so right now we're looking at our particular automation. So let's say on this particular track is where we have the, let me just make sure, just look at the inspector here. All right, so let's say we have our envelope shaper here, and we have its automation. So if we want to copy the envelope shaper over, so, you know, what you could do is just hold down the Alt or Option key and drag, and we could do that. Now, if we, so, you know, we could copy the automation data, but you want to make sure that that we have the same automation, you know, because the automation lanes aren't going to show up the same way on the other track. So let's say I want to come over here. Let's go to so let's say we'll go to our inserts and we'll say attack gain. So we could do that. Let's go to attack width. is it length? Let me just, and let's do release gain. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to select all of the automation points here. And I'll copy. And then when we come here, what we want to do is I'm going to hit Alt or Option plus V, and now the automation will automatically be copied to the new tracks. So why it's not necessarily like super easy to do that is because we have to make sure that the automation data for the parameters that we're copying from the one track, you know, we could copy the automation easily enough, but we need to make sure that the automation parameters, the parameters that are being automated, are the same between the two. But as far as the copying the insert, so the insert itself is, you know, you can copy over, but you know, the automation isn't necessarily tied to the insert because the automation lives in the project window. But you know, so that's why you would need to assign the same parameters, but then you could select and cut and copy and paste the automation from one track to another. All right, so we see Vo1D says, hi from Ukraine. I'm new with Cubase, longtime Ableton user, just got my LE license with my MIDI keyboard. Well, welcome to the Steinberg family. Feel free to ask any question. Don't be intimidated. It could be the most basic question, the most complex question. We'll try to help you out. And thanks for being a part of the community. All right, Kevin, Ariel, Matamoros asks, why if I duplicate a vocal track to another track for harmonizing in Audio, do the changes also affect the original? It's probably because the original track that you duplicated and the ones that you are editing are in fact the same audio file. So let's say if we have our vocal here, so just come over, just take off the silly loop.
Feel the weight in light we lay.
All right, so now if I duplicate this track, we not only duplicate the track, but it's the same exact audio file that's being used on both tracks. So we need to make this a distinct audio file. Now there is a preference. So if you go to your preferences or settings, go to editing to audio, and we could say on processing shared clips, we could say create new version. So now if we do this, so you could, if it may default to process existing clip, but now if I wanted to come here, let's do a quick audio edit here. And we'll do audio edit here. And if we notice that when we do this, that we will probably, it's just, okay. All right, so now when we come over, we could just kind of see. So what we want to do is to make sure that they are kind of separate, unique files. So we'll come over, let's say we'll play them. So let's say these are both playing at the same time.
I feel the weight.
So now if I move this,
I feel the weight.
so you just want to make sure that, because why it's editing it is because it's using the same audio file, And if you change the audio file and that audio file is duplicated in both places, then it will change both of them. But go to, again, your preferences or settings, depending on your OS, to editing to audio. And it says on processing shared clips, change this to create new version. And then you'll have just a new version automatically created anytime you do edits to your particular file. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we see Michael Marshall just sending greetings from Somerset in the UK. Thanks for joining us. So we see from DJ Yassian says, is it possible to run Cubase in demo mode for all Steinberg software like Groove Agent 5? So if you are running trial versions, you know, so with the trial versions, you know, you need to make sure that if you want it, like, you know, if there's a Groove Agent 5 trial, so, you know, just if you have a Cubase trial, that's going to be for all of the different elements that are licensed inside of Cubase, and it's independent of, you know, if you had a license, a demo, a trial version for a virtual instrument, or I'm not sure if there's trial versions for Groove Agent off the top of my head. But running a trial version doesn't automatically give you full access to trial versions of other trial versions. They function independently. All right. See from Michael Marshall, is it possible to change the pitch bend range on Artifact Guitar? All right, so let's take a look. All right, so see if there's a pitch bend range. All right, so we have kind of the settings there. Let me just... All right, let me just see if it's maybe... Often it's kind of within the instrument, but let's see if it's in maybe the program. So now many of the instruments, it's kind of, you can set the pitch bend range kind of within the macro page. So let's say if I come here, this, there's usually kind of on the macro page, but let me see if we could find it here. So let's see. All right, so we're just putting pitch bend on. All right, so let's see if we could find where to. Change that. I don't see it off the top of my head. If you want to send me an email, Michael, I could see if I could figure it out for you. Let me just see if it's set in Hallian Sonic versus the main instrument. Yeah, I don't see the pitch bend control, probably like you. Yeah, I don't see where the pitch bend range is set, but I could do some more research on it for you, Michael. Sorry about that. And if you want to send me a brain cramp email reminder, we could have it for the next live stream. All right, we have Paul Offenbacher from Cedar Pines, California joining, so thanks for being on. All right, so we see from DJ Yasin Trabi says about the demo mode, says with message no valid license found. So yeah, if you don't have a valid license, or if you've run the trial version already, so if you don't have a license for it, then it's not going to operate for you. All right, so you see from Soren, it says, Greg, the skipping playback does not exist in an empty project and neither in some other project. So I can go in plugin hunt for a reason why it happens, right? Yeah, so it would probably be, and if it's, I would be less concerned if it's kind of visually stuttering a little bit versus audibly stuttering a little bit. So. All right, so wonderful to see Best Green Jesus, who says he's happy just to lurk here. All right, so Benny just says, thanks, Greg. All right. All right, Balsa just asks, what is the use of project root key? You can only select a key, but not the music mode. So so with sample libraries, when we want to work with sample libraries, they'll just come over here. So let's go to a new project, and let's say we want to listen to, so we're going to come over here and let's go to our media previewer. So we'll come over and all right, so let's do, all right, so let's say we want to have, all right, let me just find more audio. All right, so or we could do the production grooves here. This might be a good example. Or the Pro Instrument Bundle. Okay, so let's say I want to have. All right, so we can see that this is going to be in A major by the name of the loop. All right, so we can see that these are in A major. But let's say I want to set my project root key. And if you don't see a project root key, you might have to right click up here and enable the project root key. So let's say my song is not in the key of A, but my song is in the key of G. So now what we could do is just come over here and we can say link. So as we come over here, we could just say, okay, I want to set my project root key to G. So now what we're listening to, so now we're previewing in the right key. So I could drag this file out. Let's say I want maybe an acoustic piano. My acoustic piano, let's say, is in C major. So now when I drag this out, this will be in our project root key. So now even though one was in A major, one was in C major, they could kind of both play back. Let me just turn this off. So now, so as we play these back, they'll both play back in the key of G major. So let's see if there's a loop that's on. Let me just. So now if I switch my project root key, let's say from G to E, let's make it A. So at this point, it will automatically allow us to take, audio loops, MIDI loops that have the metadata for their key, drop it in a project root key. Now all of these songs would automatically match the project root key. So you're not having one song in D, one audio file in D, and another one conflicting that's in E flat or C sharp, etc. So. So Jazz Dude just telling people last chance to take advantage of the Wavelab 30th anniversary promo. All right. Okay, so from Roland Stuff says, hi Greg, how can I separate out the individual MIDI notes from an instrument in Halion that has a built-in rhythm such as strum or picked guitar, like one finger muted strumming guitar? Thanks. Okay, so let's take a look. So it could depend on if the sample was, the audio file was recorded with the strum. So with that, you may not be able to separate it, or if the strum is added with something like a flex razor. So let's come over. Let's do it in Halion Sonic for now, just to show. All right, and let me just one finger muted strumming guitar. Okay. So. Okay, so with this, All right, so we're going to take a look and see if this is utilizing the flex phraser. So, all right, so it is utilizing the flex phraser. All right, so I'm going to come over here. And what I'm going to do is, so you could come right over here and just choose you want to edit, go to the program, and then make sure that you have the flex phraser here. So this is just like a MIDI arpeggiator. So at this point, if we wanted to get the individual notes out, what we could do is click on record. And now I could okay, and at that point I'll just take the recording off, and we can just drag this directly to the project window. And what we've done is basically we've captured the MIDI, the arpeggiation. We've automatically captured that arpeggiation, and now we could take individual notes out if needed. So again, with that particular instrument, since the chords are coming from the flex phraser, you want to click on record, and you could have all sorts of different arpeggios to work with in the flex phraser. It's pretty great. And at that point, just click on record, play the phrase, and then once you come right over here, you'll see just this little MIDI icon. Just drag that right out to your project window, and then you could just double click, and that is basically capturing the arpeggio for you as you look at it, and then you could freely edit the individual notes. Okay, so we see Anthony Clark just saying, hey everyone. Paul Offenbacher just says, hi, I have a monogram orbiter, but I cannot get it to scroll left and right. Are there key commands or CC note I can use? So generally, if you come right over, so just go to your key commands. And then I think if you go to, you could just use under transport, jog left, jog right. You could also there's different shuttle. So if you wanted to shuttle play reverse, shuttle play forward, so you could program it to just access those particular keys and those particular functions right from various key commands. You don't need to use MIDI CC. But you could just simply, if it's your monogram is able to just do key commands and have separate key commands for left, like rotating it counterclockwise or clockwise, then you could just assign it to those functions. And again, you'll see them probably if you go directly to your edit menu to key commands. Just look at, you'd probably want to use the shuttle play, and if it does like that way, you could have varying degrees. At the farther you go to the left or right, you could just simply be able to adjust those functions. So you all right, so we have a question. Do professionals stack keyboards on the same track, Omnisphere, or do they use separate tracks? At the moment, I use separate tracks, but 14 tracks each, a verse and chorus. Synths is a lot. So, if you are, if it is like a scenario where, okay, we want to have one instrument track and this is going to, depending on the instrument, so if we had like 13 different instruments loaded here into Howling and Sonic, most instruments would utilize only one CPU processing core for that. Hallian, Sonic, and Hallian, and other Steinberg instruments, if you go to the options, you could just come over here and choose for it to utilize multi-core. So that's less of an issue. But, you know, most people tend to run different, will run multiple instances because it will split out CPU cores for VST instrument hosts that don't have the capability of using multi-core. All right, we alter Ego checking in from Connecticut, and he's just saying what's up to all the Cubase denizens. All right. All right, so we have John Costigan checking in from a steamy Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, we see Jazz Dude was kind enough to post a fully working trial version of Groove Agent 5. All right, so we have the artist known as Love just saying hello, everyone. I hope everyone's great. Thank you for everything you do, Greg. I've hit the like thumbs up button. He's also giving praise to Jazz Dude for all of his efforts. All right, Balsa asks, in the project window, arrange tool selection on a group track, lower or raise the volume line of group tracks. All right, so let's see, in the project window, range tool selection on a group track, lower, raise the volume line of group tracks. So if we, let's say if we have these two tracks here, and I select it with the range tool, so we'll just make this more obvious here. All right, so I select these with, let's say, the range tool. And if I want to lower the volume or change the volume on those, we could just do it like that. So we could do kind of the clip-based volume that doesn't necessarily carry over to automation, which we could have to select separately. So let's say if I had automation, so let's see if I grab my range tool here, and now if we want to, we could adjust kind of the automation. Let's see. So we could adjust kind of the automation one at a time like this. But if you wanted to just take your clip gain volume, you could just grab it, select a range on multiple events, and just from the center, you'll see kind of this little line appear right here in the center, and you could adjust accordingly. All right. And next part of the question was, is there a preference for that line to not react when accidentally clicked on? All right, so maybe it's with, I may have misunderstood. So let's say if I send these to a group track. Okay, so let's say, and we see, so I'm going to add a group track to the selected tracks. And when we do this, we see kind of our automation line appear here. So if we grab this, you know, we can just come over here. We can make adjustments here. So if we wanted to prevent any adjustments here, I think if we just select the group track here, and I think that there is a lock command. So you see this little padlock. So now we can see that the on the group track that the volume line will disappear, so we can't move it there. So if you want to avoid kind of accidental changes in your group track volume, what you could do is just simply lock it, and now we can't change it. So just this little icon directly there from the inspector while the group channel is selected. Just let me know if that's helpful for you. Now you can see Michael Marshall will send an email. Okay, I'll see if I can figure it out for you. Dig through the manual a bit. All right. All right. So we just see from kind of an unnamed person, just says, wondering about says 32 gigabyte laptop is definitely worth buying. So thanks for the correct, and his music dream is coming true. So that's great. All right, so FlyV asks, what do you do right at the beginning of creating a track? Choose the BPM, I assume. What other sort of things do you do? So, generally, when I'm starting a project, and I'm not like a songwriter or composer, but a lot of times, first thing I would do is maybe get an idea. And even if you wanted to just kind of like tap the tempo, so say, okay, I'm kind of feeling, just you could click on it with your mouse and just kind of, and then you could just click on the tap, and you could just say, okay, I want to insert the tempo at the cursor position or just automatic. And then you could just have your tempo set right there just from tapping. So that would probably be the first thing. When I've watched many kind of composers, I remember watching Fred Corey being in his studio once, and he was working on a show for NBC, and he would just kind of watch the scene. And he's a great drummer. He was a drummer in the band Cinderella and toured with Guns N' Roses and Poison, and is filled in for Night Ranger, just wonderful, great rock drummer. And, it's just great watching him. He's just kind of watching the scene and kind of tapping how he felt, where he felt the music should be going with the scene. So I think, if you're just kind of starting off, some people may play a lick and, just say, oh, I like the feel of that particular lick, and do a tempo calculation of the lick after. But many people, I think, will start with the BPM and just kind of click here with your mouse and just kind of tap in, and then you could get an idea. Okay, I want it to be 99 beats a minute. Boom. I know some people in classical circles will always tell you that tempos that end in a 4 will always be better musically. I remember the conductor Robert Shaw told me that once, just an off-the-cuff comment when I was chatting with him about music. So something to consider as well. All right, so we see Soren just says, thanks, Greg, for the subject of the playhead skipping. So you're welcome. Hope you get it figured out. All right, so we see from 5E, next question is like, also while creating, how can you check that you're on time? So sometimes there's great performances where the timing is just really bad, and sometimes that makes the whole performance. I think a lot of great bands, so you could kind of view your timing against the grid, but I always go with, if it feels great, to me it's perfectly fine, and I come from, like I remember doing early MIDI work, and we would do a lot of stuff because early MIDI sequencing was often criticized because it was so, structured and mechanical with timing. So, all the timing could be perfect. It didn't have to be. People chose kind of an easier path into production to make the timing perfect. And then after a while, it became, like people liked drum loops as opposed to a MIDI drum part because the drum loops had kind of this feel or a different groove to it. So I kind of seen the whole gamut from, we want a drum machine to be perfect and we want musicians to play like the drum machine, to now we want to program the drums, the MIDI drums, to sound like a human with their kind of timing, inconsistencies. So, one thing that I do a lot is like going into a chorus, I may bump up the BPM, 1 beat a minute, 2 beats per minute, just to have a subtle kind of like an organic feel of like when all the musicians are excited and playing in a chorus together, so it's perfectly fine. But if you want to, it doesn't have to be perfectly on the grid. Many people recording to analog tape or digital tape, they didn't have a grid to compare it to, and a lot of people came out with great records that way. All right, we see Michael Teams joining from Weatherford, Texas. He's joining us from a warm Texas day. All right, Fadi asks how to connect my Nord Electro to Cubase and record MIDI and audio track at the same time. So really all you have to do is probably your Nord Electro, I assume, has a USB, so we want to create a MIDI track. So we could come over here, let's add a MIDI track. We want to say, okay, this is going out to your Electro. The input is coming from the Electro. You could set that up. And we want to take the audio outputs at that point. So we're going to say this is going to MIDI from Nord. And then take the audio outputs of your Nord, connect it to your audio interface, and then what we want to do is to add an audio track. And we could just come over here. You want to set the stereo input of where it's actually coming from. So you can say, okay, we want to use input 1 and 2, and then record enable both tracks and hit record. So if I was doing like a virtual instrument, I could come over, let's do quick Hallian Sonic, so you would have to take the MIDI connection from the Nord to the computer and take the audio outputs from the Nord into audio inputs of your audio interface in Cubase. And then, it would kind of look something like this. So, and with a virtual instrument, I could just add a virtual instrument. We'll come over here and I'll say, okay, we're going to do our track instrument from Hallian. So at this point, when I record, I can record both MIDI and audio simultaneously. So I'll just place this in record. And that would be basically what you're doing. So you want to take the MIDI output from the Nord, record it as MIDI track, take the analog audio output. If there's a digital out, you can take that. If your audio interface has a digital in, take the audio output. And if you wanted these to always be kind of intrinsically linked so that they don't get kind of moved in time with each other, you could select and then just hit Control or Command plus the letter G for group. And now as I move one of the events, the other event will move concurrently with it. Thanks for joining us. All right, you see Jazz Dude, it's 33 degrees Celsius where he's at in Germany. All right. See, everyone is anxious for Michael Team's ice cream distribution. All right, you see Michael Teams has granted myself and my family 1 gallon of American flag ice cream. And he says, thanks, strawberry, vanilla, and blue coconut. And Michael's wishing everyone a happy 4th of July in the U.S. All right. All right, so we see from Fadi, when I group mono tracks to a mono group track, the panning disappears from all tracks, and I can't redo this step. Only thing happening is removing a group track, only how to solve it. So do you really need, if you have panning on your tracks, so let's say we have, and we'll make these mono tracks here. Okay, so now when we come over here, let's pan our tracks accordingly. Okay, so we see that we have our panning kind of set here. So what you want to make sure that you're able to do is just, so if you're panning it to a mono group, there's no panning involved. There's nothing to pan it to. So you need to pan it if you want to maintain the pannings here. Just create, so if I come over here, let's add a group track to the selected track. So if we make our group track stereo, we'll come here and then all the panning is preserved because we're sending it to a stereo source. Now, if we come over and let's route these tracks, and again, let me just set my output here accordingly. Okay, so now if we add a group track to the selected and we make it a mono group, you can't really pan within a mono group. So that's why you kind of lose the panning. So you need to, if you want to preserve the panning, it has to be going to a source that can accept panning. So just create a stereo group track and then you should be all set. All right, wonderful to see Razel Zamini checking in from Denmark. Michael Teams is saying happy July 1st to all Canadians, our fellow continental friends, all right, in the U.S. All right, Roland Stuff just says, hi Greg, many thanks for introducing me to the Flex Razor with the one finger, strum guitars, and Hallian. Unfortunately, I already have recorded the part. So can it be separated into individual MIDI notes in the event window? I thought I'd seen you separate out arpeggiated VSTs this way in the past, but I may be wrong. Often am. Thanks, Greg. So you would need to, how the Flex Razor works, some instruments like Groove Agent can have a direct MIDI output. Hallian Sonic and the Flex Razor doesn't have a direct output from the, but some instruments will, like that, it will trigger patterns, like, often drums will have a MIDI output, but currently the Flex Razor doesn't. So there isn't a way to kind of turn it in, but you could probably just, as you play in the particular note, just, record the Flex Razor and then drag and drop it in. I know it's kind of a 3-step approach, but it'll still get you to the same place in the long run. All right, so Michael Team says, silly question here. Convert audio track to MIDI for editing one note out of key. I tried but cannot get it in tune. I recut the track, but just wondering if it is possible. So if it is a single note event, then you could, utilize, pitch shifting, or vary audio. If it is going to be like one note within a chord and the string, let's say you're playing a guitar part and your A string is flat, there isn't a way in Cubase currently to take the A string and then to tune just the A string without affecting the other thing, the other notes that are played within the chord. So if it's kind of a chord, like piano, Rhodes, string chords, piano, guitar, then you're not really able to do it. But a single note, you could utilize vary audio to do it. Michael Teams just says he's not sure if he could play on a grid. I bet you could. So it's just like playing with the metronome that many of us have done for years. All right, great to see Matt Elston on. All right, Boss just asks, hey Greg, off topic, how do you go about creating timestamps after the stream? A 4-hour-long video is done. I would love to learn and pass that on to podcast productions. So what I do is I have to watch the live stream again, and I'll just show you. And I have one half is the live stream, the other half is a Word document. So if I come here, we could just say, like, here's the index from June 27th, 2025. And what I do is I put the timestamp in this format. So we say, okay, at 4 minutes and 16 seconds, it says, what is the topic of the stream? And so this is the time format, and I just kind of copy it directly from watching the video on YouTube. So if it's in this format and we go to, so the time is in this format, and when we go to the live stream, so yeah, I may break a space-time continuum watching my own live stream while I'm doing it. So, but when we come here and we go to the comments, at that point, I just paste in from the Word file using this as the time format. And then when I paste it in the comments, this automatically places the timestamp at that particular area. So that way we could navigate directly to that particular timestamp. So this is the format that I use for time. So I kind of keep it in, I have like a Word document for like our corporate fiscal year. I have like a document for like the master time index as well. So this is like every question of the 40,000 questions. If I open up this Word document, and then what I do in this scenario is I copy from the YouTube comment. And the YouTube comment here, that places the timestamp, and then I copy that into another Word document, and we could see that timestamp is preserved, and you could navigate directly to that point in the video. So keep kind of the use this time format, like hour, minute, seconds, and then paste it into the YouTube and then copy from the YouTube to a different Word document, and then I kind of have to put a paragraph break between them. And let's see, just out of curiosity, how many pages. And if anyone wants this Word document, email me and I'm happy to share it. So if we want to come over here, let's see, we're kind of 827 pages from since we ramped up the live streams in COVID. So that's how you could do it. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, let's get to the next question. John Costigan is commenting to Michael Teams that since he's from Texas, which is highly known for their football, that they play football on a grid, so he should be okay. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we see from Aggress Steve says, respect to the Cubase professor, I learn a lot, but implementing the teach knowledge and the workflow is crazy. I have lots of questions, but fine, I just enjoy the stream. So, yep, so you could always rewatch it anytime you want. So, yeah, and if you want to just have any questions, just, keep a little Word, like a little text document available and just kind of jot them down as you run into them, and then we will be happy to answer them for you. And I think it's always great that people learn from other people's questions and could get stuff figured out. All right, let me go to some of the questions that were mailed in. All right, so a mailed in question was, where are templates stored? I edited my main template and now I can't find it. Okay, so if you have templates that you're working with, we can just come directly over here. So I'm going to go to my hub. So you can get to the hub from the hub menu. You could just say open hub. And let's go over to templates. So let's say at this point we want to find where the template is for, let's say, Michael Romanowski's Coast Mastering. So as I'm working here, if you want to find the template, right click on the template, and then we could just choose Reveal in Explorer if you're on a Windows platform, or Reveal in Finder. And that will take you directly to the location where your templates are stored. So now if we want to see it as columns, so if we want to just kind of see the field here, so if you go to on Mac OS, you go to your admin account, to the library, to preferences, to Cubase 14, to a project templates folder, and then you could see the actual template stored directly there. All right. Okay, so next question was mailed in. Can I expand the color palette beyond the 128 shades? Can I make some tracks black, white, or gray? All right, so when we want to work with colors, what we could do is just go to the project color setup. So a lot of times you may default to like 16 colors. If you click Command or click Alt or Option and click on the colors, I think this will be your default color set. Now if we go to your project menu, we could come over to your project color setup. And if we go to the options or presets here, rather, we can say, okay, the number of basic colors. So we can say I want to have 32. So we have 32 basic colors. And then we could have different number of tints. So we could say, so we could have 128 different colors. So as we look at this, we could do that. Now, the second part of this question, so that's kind of the maximum number of colors, but if you wanted to customize the particular colors, what you could do is, so we'll come over, we'll say apply, and let's go to our project color setup again from the project menu. So we can see our 128 colors here. And if you double click, we can say, okay, I want these to all be, you know, very gray instead. So you can pick, have it be almost dark. So you could pick kind of within the color spectrum, all the different shades of colors that you would expect or want. So if you want black, gray, different color tints, you could customize those as well. All right, I'm just all right, go back to the lives questions. All right. See, Jazz makes a great point. Says, remember how you learned the alphabet as a kid? It's the same thing, repeating over and over. So, all right. Balsa asks, on drum machine's pitch tab, can you explain the envelope depth, volume, velocity, attack, hold, and decay? Is it just for synthesized drum sounds, or can it affect audio samples too? All right, so let's take a look. All right, so I'm going to add a drum track here. All right, so let's say I'll add a kick, and I'll drop a sample in. Okay. All right, so we have a synthesized and a sample here. All right, so now let's go ahead to the pitch tab here. So let's say, okay, I want to go to my, so if we want it to, all right, so let's take a look at, all right, so as we kind of adjust here, so you could adjust kind of the punch. And that's just kind of adjusting how long, like the pitch of the sample. And then if we have, we could adjust the amount of the envelope there. So if we have less, so you could just kind of very easily come over here and let me select my snare. So when we go to the pitch here, we'll have different parameters for the samples. So if we wanted to go to the envelope depth, I think if we, let's see if we can, so you do have different parameters for the synthesis versus the samples. All right. So let's say if we want to adjust So let's see if we... So if we have our velocity here, you could hear kind of the amount, the pitch change based on the velocity. And then the hold of how long. So let's say if we... So that will, but you know, probably the envelope depth will make a... So we say now it's adjusted to K. So that'll give you an idea of what's going on. Some of the different parameters. All right. All right. All right, wonderful to see Pertti Komenen checking in from Finland. All right, Roland Stuff says this is amazing service you offer, Greg. What you have to do to also provide the timestamp questions every time is astonishing. It's so helpful to browse topics afterwards. Yeah, I think, you know, I don't, you know, sometimes I'm like, oh, like a Friday night, I'm not looking forward to, well, most people are kicking back for the weekend, and I'm like 10 o'clock at night on Friday still doing timestamps. But I think it makes it all so much more worthwhile to have the timestamps. So it's, yeah, it's very, it's, a little bit of annoyance for me, but I think the beneficial far, far outweighs the annoyance I get in creating the timestamps afterwards. All right, so we see Balsa just says, thanks, Greg, for shining a light in your post-production process regarding timestamps. Mad respect for watching the whole stream again and doing everything manually. Thanks for sharing. So, yeah, there might be some AI tool that does it, but then we could kind of actually kind of have the questions in kind of a sensible human manner. But, yeah, it just takes a little bit of time, but, again, it's worth it and beneficial for everyone. It kind of gives the content a bit more evergreen status that people could search easily. All right. All right, just reading through comments. See Pertti and Uno talking. All right, we see Michael Teams is granted best cream Jesus, 1 gallon of pomegranate ice cream. All right, so we see, hi, is there a way to drag samples onto the pattern editor without returning to the drum machine each time to drop them on pads? Switching back and forth gets tedious. So currently, the pattern editor, so when we, let's say if I just load up a particular kit here, the pattern editor, is just... doesn't contain any sound. So this is like the sequencer, and we send a sequencer out to a sound source. Now that sound source can be set up as, it could be going to a, hardwared instrument, it could be going to Groove Agent, it could be going to any source. But let's say if I just come here, if you don't want to switch back and forth all the time, I could just, what you could do is go to your drum machine, like in the lower zone, and let's see if we could do this. We'll come here. All right, so now I have my drum machine here. So I just kind of broke it out into a different window. So if I'm kind of playing along, just make sure I'm past So now if I wanted to come over here and like change the snare, I could just come over here and say, okay, let's adjust. And let's change our clap. So let's say we're gonna make our clap. So now we can just simply have kind of like your pattern editor. And just have the drums directly on top so that you don't have to go back and forth. But once again, this is just kind of the sequencer and doesn't have any sounds. And you could send, you know, and have a virtual instrument, have a real hardware instrument or the drum machine, and just kind of break away. So once we come over here, we could go to your drum machine, click on the little arrow to send it into a separate window, and then you could just have the pattern editor right there. So if you want to just and then so you could just come over here, tweak the drums and tweak the patterns without having to go back and forth between the different tabs there. So give that a try. Let me know if that makes sense. All right, we see Michael Teams has granted Benny 1 gallon of chocolate chip ice cream. And Perty is happy with his ice cream choice because it's 26 degrees Celsius. All right, FlyV asks, I just realized the hotkeys in the mix console for sus and Q-Link. What does suspend and absolute do? Okay, so let's say we're in our mix console. All right, let me just add some more audio tracks here. Okay, so let's come over, and these will be dealing with linking. So let's say we have a number of tracks here. Okay, so now when I come over and let's say I have these in Q-Link, so I'm going to hold down Alt or Option plus the Shift key, and then I can move these in my Q-Link. So when I want to suspend, I can now, let's say if I have my Q-Link active and I suspend, now I could just move one, and then when we activate Q-Link again, these will all be linked together. Now what absolute does is, let's say I want all these to be set to the same value. So when you click on absolute and I move one of them, they'll all be moved to the same value. So if I want these all, if I hit Command or Control and click, we can move all the faders to 0 dB. So now they could be at the same exact value. If I click on the suspend, I can now move just this one even if they're all Q-linked together. So now that they're Q-linked, they'll move proportionally. If I want to suspend, I can move just that one. If I want them all to move to the same value, we could enable the Q-link and move one, and then they're all set to the same value. So suspend will allow you to kind of adjust one independently. Absolute will allow you to move all to the same value, and that could be for an effect send, an EQ, volume, routing, stuff like that. And so those are kind of those functions. Let me know if that makes sense. All right, you see Michael Teams is comparing me to a very short, wise guy in Star Wars. So thank you for that. All right, so we see Metin Han just says that's a great tip. Thank you. Probably about the drum machine and the pattern editor. All right, so Metin Han or Metin Han just asked, can you demonstrate how you would set up a reverse reverb macro? All right, so if I want it, reverse reverb, so one of the things that you can do that a lot of people don't know about is, let me just go to a different project here. So let's say we'll go over here. Let's go to our vocalist here.
Day after.
All right, so I want to put a reverb on this. So let's add an effect track to the selected track. So I'm going to add, and we're going to go to the reverence reverb. And reverence reverb is a convolution reverb, meaning that it kind of uses samples as its basis. So let's say if we come over here, we can now, and let me just put this on, let's, just take it off of. All right, and let's say I'll just. All right, so but one of the things that you could do here is just reverse this reverb.
Day after. A new day. Remember me. All is love. Are we there?
So you could take any audio, any reverb impulse. So even if we were doing kind of like a small room, so let's say, okay, I just want let's say so let's say a small room, and we reverse this.
What dimension am I in?
Right, and if we wanted to just kind of render the reverb, what we could do is come over. So let's say I want to take this particular phrase here.
What dimension am I in?
So I'm going to take just that. I'll set my left and right locators around that section here. Hit the letter P. And I could say, let's do an export audio mix down. And I want just the effects. So we'll add that reverence reverb, and we'll say, we're going to create an audio track. We'll export the audio. All right, so now that reverb is exported right there. So let's go ahead and I'll take the reverb off of the send from the send here. So now we have the reverb. We have our reverb printed, and then all you'd have to do is, if you wanted to, just make sure I did that right. Let me just, okay. Let's export. So again, go to export audio mix down. Select the reverb.
What dimension am I in?
And then just select that particular reverb, and you could come over here and go to processes and just reverse the printed reverb. So you could do stuff like that as well. But my first approach would probably be to work with the reverse, working with the reverse reverb inside of the Reverence plugin. All right, Cycling is Awesome asks, hi Greg, when should real time be activated when exporting a session or multiple tracks? Thanks. So if we have a project and we want to export, so let's say we have this as our project. All right, so, and we'll see, let's say we want to do like an export audio mix down. And then we'll have kind of the options. So let's say we're doing multiple and I want to take all of my audio tracks. So we'll have the option here for real time. Some people feel that real time could sound different than a non-real time export. I tend to disagree with that. When people need to use a real time export is when you're actually working with external effects or external instruments, because obviously those, if we're using an external reverb or external compressor, we can't export that faster than real time. It has to be processed in real time. So generally when you're using external processing is when to use the real time export. And I think if the project has a real-time component like an external effects or external instrument that the project is using, that it will switch for you. Some people, who get paid by the hour will put real-time export because they could pad the time for another 3 minutes more. So some engineers I've seen are really good at padding time in sessions because they get paid by the hour. So if that's how you get compensated, you can do real-time export and it'll take a little longer. So, all right. We see from James Daly who asks, I made a Hallian sonic track and I made a chord track from a song. How now I like to record the either chord track or the Hallian into a wave. How? Okay. Okay, so I'm not sure if this. I'd like to record the either chord track or the Hallian into a wave. Okay, so let's say if we have a song. All right, so let's do a quick new project here. All right, let me just do an empty project. Sorry about that. All right, so I'm going to import a wave file here. So I'm not sure if the song is all right, and let's add a Hallian sonic. All right, so let's say we have our song. So I'm not sure if the song just to make a chord track from a song now, I'd like to record either the chord track or the Hallian into a wave file. So let's say we have like our song here. So I'm going to grab a chord track. So I'm not sure if this is what you want to do. So I'm going to drag this. All right, so we have our chord track, and let's So now we're taking kind of the song here, the chords from the song. So now if I want to just add an audio track, and we'll set the input from our track instruments, Hallian Sonic. So now, like as we play, I could just record. So that's kind of taking the chord track. So it says I made a Hallian song track and I made a chord track from a song. Now I like to record either the chord track or the Hallian into a wave. So again, so we extracted the chords from the track just by dragging the audio file. And then I set up my Hallian Sonic track. And at that point, I just clicked on the record enable so that the chord track is using the monitored tracks. So the chord track is now playing the chords of the Hallian Sonic instrument. And then I created an audio file where the audio input came from the track instrument, Hallian Sonic. And now we've turned that into a wave file. So let me know if that's what you want to accomplish, James, if that makes sense, or if I'm completely off track with that. All right, wonderful to see Val checking in from Vienna, Austria. All right, so we just see a question. This was directed to Jazz Dude. It says, do you know what is the lowest CPU RAM VSTi in Cubase? Is it maybe retrolog? So it could depend upon the patch. Some of the Hallian Sonic content will be very, very light. Like the included content. But if you're on something like Extreme, that could be more audio performance intensive. Retrolog is pretty light on CPU overall, but there could be different included plugins that with the Hallian Sonic 7 that could run kind of very lean. All right, Jazz Dude's also mentioning Trip as an instrument. All right, for low CPU audio performance usage. All right, so we see from James says, gotcha, thanks, Greg, exactly what I wanted. All right, so let me look for some more questions that were sent in advance. All right, so next question that was sent in, can I make a default multiple controller lane that shows velocity, sustain, and modulation? Okay. All right, so let's say if we come to our MIDI part here, let me just... All right, so we go to our controller lanes, and let's say we go to kind of full screen. So if we want to have multiple controller lanes, so let's say we want to click on velocity, and we want sustain and modulation. So we'll come over, we'll click on the plus sign, and then we'll see sustain, and let's click on the plus sign again here and choose modulation, and we could adjust the height of all of these different components. Let me do some. Okay, and then if we want to save this as a preset, we could just come over here and we'll call this preset July 1st, 2025. Okay, so at this point, whenever we're in our editor, we can just say, okay, let's go to July 1st, 2025. And if you're in the lower zone editor, you may get a message that there's not enough vertical height. So if that's the case, we can just come over here. Now we can see that, but if we adjust kind of the vertical height, we can see that some of the controller lanes will eventually kind of disappear. But if you're running in a full screen, then it's probably not such a big issue for you. All right, so you see a question from Val. It says, I try sending a raw MIDI track to sidechain inputs of compressors, but want to send the same MIDI track to multiple sidechain inputs, but somehow only can route on per track workaround. Okay. So let me just create kind of scenario here. Okay, so I'm not sure if it's an instrument track. I'm going to start with an instrument track here. Let's get to the Groove Agent SE. Okay. All right, so let's say we want to create kind of a side chain from this drum. Okay, so try sending a raw MIDI track to sidechain inputs of compressors, but want to send same MIDI track to multiple sidechain inputs. All right, so let's see, just to kind of show this, let's come over, let's just throw a compressor on. Just send more of this out. All right, so we have kind of the sidechain there. But I want to send the same MIDI track to multiple sidechain inputs. All right, so let's say if we duplicate this and we go, let's say another audio track. right, so let me just... All right, so we can hear the side chaining going on. All right, so let's say we have... Let me adjust the volume here. All right, so let's say if we come over here to our dynamics, so let's say we'll do the compressor. So we can still come over here and send it from the groove agent. So it looks like it's going to multiple. So, you know, it looks like even on multiple tracks that we can still set that same groove agent track as the sidechain input for multiple tracks. All right. And it says with an instrument track, I can send multiple with the sends, but it can't. Can I also do it with raw MIDI track? So if we're doing it from a MIDI track, it's not the MIDI track. So if we want to do it from a raw MIDI track as opposed to an instrument track, so let's take this. I want to add a VSTI rack here. Now the MIDI track itself doesn't have a particular input or output. So let's say I want to add a Groove Agent SE here. Okay, so we could have our MIDI track, and I'll just copy all these parts down. So we don't do the routing from the MIDI track. And let's go ahead and just change this name to GA2. So when we want to do it, so you know the MIDI is just generating the sound, but if we want to come over to the sidechain input for the compressor, what you could do is just come over and I'll remove this. Let's say we want our sidechain input. So let's say we want, I'll just choose a different, let me just choose a Hallian instead. Okay, so now we have these going out. To Hallian Sonic. Okay, so now let's see if we could set the sidechain here. Yeah, so I guess because, you know, it is a MIDI track, so, you know, you might have to utilize an instrument track for that, because that way the MIDI and the audio are kind of intrinsically tied together with that. So, but let me know if you need to use a MIDI track for a particular reason as opposed to an instrument track, Val. Sorry about that. All right, question from this Ninja Scared says, when I duplicate an audio event on an audio track and attempt to reverse the end of the second event, it also changes the first event. How can I edit them independently? All right, so we showed this a little bit earlier in the live stream. So let's say, let me just find something that's a little more. Okay, so let's say we have this file here, and I want to duplicate. So when we duplicate the track, not only are we duplicating the track and all of its settings, but it's using the same actual file. So what you want to do is go to your preferences or settings, go to editing to audio, and then when it says on processing shared clips, because these two clips here are referencing the same audio file. Now what you could do is just say, instead of process existing clip, which is the default state, is just choose create new version. So now when I have create new version enabled, I can select that bit of the audio. I could reverse. So let's go to my process. I could reverse. And now one file will play back as is. So that would be all you'd have to do. So just go to preferences or settings, editing, audio, and then on processing shared clips, set it to process or create new version. And that way it's not processing this, because even though these are on different tracks, it's the same file that's playing back on the different tracks. So you need to be able to kind of, when you do that, to create a new version so that it could be independent. All right, so we see from Roland stuff, how can I lock the height of tracks in the event window, please? I seem to lose control of them, and they keep changing height as I work on a project. So I'm not sure if there's like a vertical lock. So let's say if we have our number of tracks here, so there's a couple things that could throw it off. But I think if we come over here, if we click right here, so I don't think it could be locked, but what you could do is there are kind of different presets that you could use. So if you're going to see 2 rows by default or 3 rows, 4 rows, you can, and again, it's if you go to like the lower right-hand corner of the project window and kind of go up vertically from kind of our zoom, then you could just come over here and just say, zoom to 3 heights or 1 if you wanted to. So it's not necessarily locked, but it could get you back to kind of a more uniform height, vertical height between all of the tracks. Okay. All right, so we see Randy Lee on. And Val just saying, thanks, Greg. I'll try around, but usually I can't select a raw MIDI in the sidechain selection because it never shows up. Because the MIDI itself isn't generating any sound. MIDI is sending MIDI out to something that generates a sound, whether it's a virtual instrument or if it is a hardware-based instrument, like something like, let's say, like a Yamaha Montage or something, or Nord, like we got asked earlier. All right, let me go back to a couple questions that were mailed in. All right, so we see question that was mailed in. Can I use the virtual keyboard to actually record MIDI information without a piano keyboard if I'm working remotely on a laptop? Okay, so let's come over here. Let's see if we have a sound. I will add an instrument track here. All right, so if you aren't aware of the virtual keyboard, what you could do is hit Alt or Option plus the letter K. And now we could use the virtual keyboard to just play back. Let me just check. So at this point, we could just kind of choose our different keys. So let me just check the routing on this. Okay, we'll just say all MIDI inputs. And there's two different views. So if you want to see the exact notes on your computer keyboard, and if you wanted to see, if you click here on the actual keyboard, you can change the octaves. So if we wanted to actually record from this, like if we're sitting in a coffee shop being creative, I could just come over and let's hit record. And now as we come over here, we can see that our MIDI data is automatically captured for us. So again, you hit Alt or Option plus K, and not Command or Control plus K rather, but Alt or Option plus K. Now, one thing that you may notice is that often many of your keys won't work for doing like functions in the program. So if you want to zoom in and out, like by hitting G and H, those keys are kind of allocated directly to the virtual keyboard. So many of the functions won't turn on, like for keyboard shortcuts, if the virtual keyboard is enabled right there. So just be aware that if all of a sudden you feel like none of your keyboard shortcuts are working, it could be just because your virtual keyboard is enabled. All right, let's go back to live questions here. All right, so we see Jorge checking in from Portugal. Thanks for joining us. We have Limith Disco Dance Latino checking in from Poland. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from Roland Stuff says, thanks, Greg. Selecting just 4 track rows to appear in a project window seems to have cured my row height problem I had. Yet another tick for you, Greg. Much obliged. So you're welcome, and thanks for asking your questions. One of the things that also, if you want to, some other tips for adjusting track heights. So let's say if I have these selected, we can very easily come over here and, like, if we want to zoom horizontally, we could just hold down, if we want to use our mouse scroll wheel, we can just hold down the command or control key. We could zoom vertically. And if we want to just use our command key plus the shift key, command or control plus the shift key, we could just zoom all of our track heights globally vertically as well. So if you want to just kind of come over here, whether the tracks are selected or not, so control or command plus the shift key, and using your mouse scroll wheel, let go of the shift key. Now you can adjust horizontally, hold the shift key down with the command or control, and you could adjust vertically. So that may be an easy way to fix it as well. All right. So we see an update from Val. Says I did the side chaining on an effects track that gets sent to different locations I need it. It's routed to no bus. That way it doesn't make any sound. Yeah, you could all do that as well. All right, so we have a question from Uno Momento. Just says, question, I soloed a vocal track, but a couple of tracks wouldn't mute, and I couldn't solo them by pressing the S button. But when I deactivated read from the top left, I was able to mute the tracks. Read is activated for all individual tracks. Why don't some tracks obey the mute command? All right, so let's set it up here real quick. Okay, so add a vocal track, solo to vocal track. A couple tracks wouldn't mute. I could solo them by pressing the S button, and I couldn't solo them by pressing the S button. All right. So let's say this is our vocal track. Okay, a couple of tracks wouldn't mute. So let's say we have, let me just do some quick automation here. I'm just going to add some existing automation, see if that's a factor. Okay, so let's see. All right. So take a look at it here. All right, so let's say, all right, and let me, okay, so we have automation on all the tracks. And let's say when I solo, seems like, all right, so now if I command solo, we could do kind of solo defeat on that. Let me just see. So solo to vocal track, but a couple of tracks wouldn't mute. And I couldn't solo them by pressing the S button, but when I deactivated read from the top left, I was able to mute the tracks. Read is activated for all individual tracks. Why don't some tracks obey the mute command? So it looks like, I don't know if you have a project that you're working on, but it seems like everything here is kind of working as expected. And if we want to do kind of like a solo defeat, that we could. So, but let me know if you have a particular project, Uno. I'd be happy to kind of take a look at it for you. All right. Okay, so we have a question from Al Will. How do you get the drum machine to play synth patterns like a sequencer? So the drum machine itself may not be, if we want to do the pattern editor. So let's come over. I'm going to add an instrument track. Let's just do a quick, we'll do a retro log track here. All right, and we'll just find a quick sound. All right, but before let me just undo that, and I'll show you a trick. So if we want, so undo that, and when I add a retro log, an instrument track here, I'm going to put it into a pattern event. And now when I add the track, all right, we'll go to the editor. And now we could see our different pitches. So I'm going to click here. Let's just add some pitches. So at this point, I want so we'll say, okay, I want this to be so now we could just kind of come over here, and so just by adding, when we add an instrument track, to have it go directly into a pattern event as opposed to a MIDI event, then we can program. So it's not necessarily the drum machine is, often kind of confused with the pattern editor, but the drum machine is really just a sound source, just like a virtual instrument. But when we go to our retro log, we can just come over here. And then we could just kind of put in different rhythmic pulses here. So then you could program kind of different pattern sequencers directly right there for melodic material, as well as it's not just for drum machines. So So let me know, Al, Will, if that makes sense for you. All right, so we see from Uno Memento, just says, Greg, your project is working fine. Mine isn't. I'll send you more information by email. Yeah, so just send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, let me just go back to some of the questions that we had mailed in advance. All right. All right. So we had a question, how can I expand the project window to full screen or something much bigger to be able to see all the lanes for comping? Okay, so if we want to just see, we just open up kind of a larger project. Let's say we'll take this project here. So obviously we could do, we can do a lot of customization for how our screens are kind of laid out for us. So we could have two inspectors, we could have a lower zone, we could have a right inspector for auditioning loops, or like the control room. But if we wanted to utilize all of this space, especially if we're working with multiple monitors, one of the things that you could do is if we just go to, so say if we play this project here, if you go to the upper right hand corner here, we can just choose to kind of hide the different windows. So if I want to hide the right zone, I want to hide the lower zone. So now we can see everything and have more screen real estate, or we could just come over here and have more mixer parameters. If we don't want to see, if we want to kind of divvy up the screen, we can do that as well. But just by going to the upper right hand corner, we could just have only our projects and their tracks laid out for us. Or if you want to see Inspector 2, Inspector 1, lower zone, right zone, we could click and have access to it just like that. All right, let's go to some other questions that were mailed in. All right, we had a question, and this came up on the Zoom social from Michael Pierce from Grand Chapel Studios in England. And he just had wanted to be able to duplicate events earlier in time, and this is for a click track. So if we want to take like a click track, and there's a number of ways to duplicate forward in time very easily. But if we want to duplicate kind of earlier in time, so I came up with a macro for this. So if we want to duplicate events, there's that happen afterwards, we could hit Control or Command plus the letter D and keep that held down. We could also just if we hold down the Alt key or Option key and go to the lower right hand corner and drag, we can make copies like so. Another method to copy afterwards would be just to come over and say we grab the right center edge, and we could just copy it and kind of drag it out to make copies like so. But if we wanted like a click track, and for it to copy early, what we could do is create a macro. So we'll do this from scratch here. So go to my key commands, and we'll do a new macro. So the first thing we want to do is to set the left and right. Now this is a one measure event, which often click tracks are. So we're going to come over here. Let's create a new macro. All right, so we'll just say, okay, here's and the first thing we want to do is we're going to set the left and right locators around the event. So I'm going to come over here to the shortcut for that. If we click here, we could actually click on the shortcut. So we'll say P locators to selection. So I'm going to add that command. I want to, so say, let's copy the event. So I'm going to have this event selected. So I'm going to copy the event. So that would be our key command of control or command plus C. So we'll say copy. Let's add that command. Now there's going to be a nudge, like nudge range, nudge loop, I think maybe, nudge loop. Or let's say loop range. Okay, so we're going to do loop range to the left, and this will move over our cycle markers over by 1 measure. Okay, so we're going to add that command. Let's come and say next we want to go to the left locator. So the keyboard shortcut for that is number 1 on the numeric keypad. So if we say go to left locator, and that's going to be under transport. Let's add that command and let's paste the event. So we'll hit command V with the keyboard shortcut search activated, and let's add that command. So now when we run the macro, and you could assign this to keyboard shortcut, we can see that this event, it starts on measure 17. If I did it right, should move all the way over earlier in time as we continue to do that. So as we look at it, we can see now that we have copied or duplicated the event, the click track event. Now, if it was a 2 measure long event, I would nudge the loop range left twice. So, but now I could just run this macro, and that will automatically copy the events earlier in time and not later in time. Okay, let me see if we get back to our live discussion. All right. All right. Let's see, Vienna, it was 39.4 degrees Celsius. Yeah, sorry, it's a bummer. All right. We see Gerald Ely joining. We see from Martinez, California, we see Terry Gray joining from Woodbury, Minnesota. Thanks for joining, Terry. Great to see you both on. All right. We see Michael Teams is giving Gerald, it looks like, all right, you see some more ice cream, Rocky Road ice cream from Michael to Gerald. All right, let's go to next question that was mailed in. All right, so next question. I have a couple questions regarding meter calibration in Cubase. I've inserted the test tone plugin on an audio track and set it output a -6 dB signal. All right, so I'll just come over here. I'll turn the control room down so we don't have to listen to. All right. All right, so let's say we're going to set this. So let's look at our control room. So I set this to, so it says I've inserted test tone plugin on audio track and set it to output a -6 dB signal. So that's what I've done here. All right. So you hear it faintly in the background. So we're -6 dB, and it says I've also set the volume max to 6 + 6 dB in the project setup. So if you go Shift + S, you can see that our volume maximum when we go to the very top of the fader is going to be +6 dB. All right. and all the fader signal chains are set to 0 dB unity gain. All right, so let's say if we come here. All right, so we look at kind of, it says the channel meters and output meters show 0 dB. All right, so here it's showing minus 6 dB. It's because we're at minus 6 here. It says the meters, all right, so it says the channel meters and the output meter shows 0 dB as this should do. All right, so here we're seeing kind of minus 6 dB. If I move this all the way up to the plus 6 dB, we'll see that that is 0. It says the meters in supervision are all over the place. The only way I can get the meter value to correspond to the scale 0 dB is to set it to the DIN scale. Take the VU meter in supervision as an example. While the channel meter shows the correct value, the VU meter shows minus 10 dB when I set the scale to VU dB. All right, so I'm going to come over and let's go to our inserts, and I will just put in our supervision. So on my levels here, I can see that we are at supervision. When I'm looking at it, we'll look at my settings that both of the supervision meters are showing 0 dB as what we see here. So I'm running the supervision here in the control room. So we can see that those are minus 0 dB. If I put this at 0 dB, since we put the test tone at 6, we should see that this would drop. But as soon as we're kind of looking at this here, we're seeing 0 dB. So now let's put this, again, now I'll turn this to go to 0 dB and minus 6. So we see minus 6 dB on the VU as well as the loudness meter here. So if we look at our meter, we can see minus 6. And if we put, so that's doing it in the control room. So those levels seem to be not all over the place to me. And if we come over, let's put we'll put supervision as an insert on the master bus. So we'll go to our analyzer section. And again, let's say if I just, so we see minus 6, let's add, so we go to the settings, we can see that we are on digital scale. Let's add a VU meter here. So we'll select from our signal, the VU, and we see minus 6. And if I go to the settings, I'm on the VU dB scale. And at that point, it all seems to be correlating for me. So the question is, how do I calibrate the meters in Cubase Supervision to show the correct values? The VU meter should show 0 dB VU when the scale is set to VU dB, not minus 10. So it seems like everything is coordinating as expected, but let me know if I did anything differently. And also, this is from Sven, if you could let me know if you are actually where you're placing the supervision meter. So if you're placing it in like the headphone area, so let's say if we come over here, if we, there's some other areas that could affect the gain, but everything seems to be kind of working as expected for me here. So let me know if I did something differently than what you did. All right. All right, so we see channel ripoff. says, "Hi G, making templates for different genres. I do a lot. I just realized that it doesn't work out when you want to keep certain sounds that you love with certain templates. Sounds go missing. Another way. So let's say if I make a couple of templates. Okay, so I want to come over here. Let's do a new project. Okay, so I'm going to add an instrument track, and let's put like an etude piano. All right, so let's say we have this loaded up, and let me just adjust my control room. Okay, so let's save this as a template. Okay, so we'll say save as template. We will call it July 1, 2025 1. Okay, let's add an instrument here. Let's do pad shop. We'll add Okay, so we'll save this as a template. Okay, and let's add one more instrument. Okay, so we have piano, synth, drum. So we'll save this as a template. Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and close this project, and we'll open our templates. So let's see if we do a new project, and we will choose, let's say, we'll start with our one instrument, just the etude piano. So we'll start here. All right, let's do a new project. We'll choose our templates of this, the piano with the synth. So we have, and the piano. All right, that seems fine. And let's come over to do another new project, and we'll do the third template, which adds the drum machine. So we'll say July 1st, 2025, 3. So it seems like all the different sounds are loading for me. So, but let me know if I'm doing something differently than you. All right. All right. It says, I just realized it doesn't work out when you want to keep certain sounds that you love with certain templates. Sounds go missing. So if you're doing it, you know, and guess I just need to keep a song folder for each template that has the audio folder with the audio that I like for each template. Sound correct? So if you want it to load up with particular sounds, you know, generally those should, so let's say if I want to have a particular sound here, so let's come over. So let's say I save this as a template now. So let's say I save as template. All right, and we'll make this July 1st. 2025 4. All right, so, you know, if you want to have that particular sound loaded up, so let's go ahead and close these. You know, the templates can save the audio files if you want. Most people tend to always want to start without like audio files. We usually get the question more of, you know, why are audio files loading up with my templates? So let's say we'll start with this template now. And now, you know, the sounds are automatically stored within the template as well. So let me know if I'm doing something differently than you are, channel ripoff. All right, always wonderful to see Sable Winters on from Bay Area, California. All right, so we see Jay from Secret Studios. This is running all over the place, so I may not see any messages, but just want to say hi and ask Greg the Wise a question really quickly. We'll see if it comes up. I think it's a little later, so we'll get there. Great to have you on the Zoom social meetup on Friday, Jay. All right, so you see Jazz Dude says he made a special meter template with 440 hertz, and sure it's correct. It runs at minus 10 dB, and it's on the Discord. Val's just saying Supervision has supervision. All right, Terry Gray just asked, hey Greg, how do I map the knobs on my NI Control S61 to the quick controls? I'd like them to control whatever is set up per track. So we could do this through the MIDI remote. So let me just get one set up here quickly. I'm just going to connect one, my Choice Sauce controller. All right, so sorry, just okay. So let's say we want. So we could just come right over here. So what we want to do is just to control. So we're going to say, let's go over here to the plus sign. And you could just come over here and say, okay, we want to do native instruments. I'm going to just add a vendor. We'll call this July 1. All right. And we'll say it's a 100 model. We're going to use my Choice Sauce input, select the MIDI input and output. Okay, then we're going to say create a MIDI control surface. So if you want it to be knobs, you could select knobs. We could select faders. So I'm going to come over here. Now what I do is I'm going to move fader 1, fader 2, fader 3, fader 4, and you can see that it's populating directly on the project right here. Now, once we have our objects, and there's a plethora, multiple object types that you can have set up. Once we have these particular object setup, we can now come over and go to the mapping assistant. So I have 8 faders. I want to assign these to my focus quick controls. So we'll say this is, I move fader 1, and we say this is going to be quick control 1. And I could double click, move fader 2, quick control 2, fader 3. So I'm assigning the parameter that I double click to the knob or fader that I move. All right, so now when we want to come over, let's take a look. Let's open up, let's say so we have our focus quick controls that are all set. All right, so we'll say, okay, let's pop over to our plugins. So now when I go to a plugin, let's say let's go to like a multi-band compressor or just a compressor, I can now control these parameters. And let's say, okay, I want it to be, we'll do just a multi-band compressor here. So, and when we go to so these will be kind of the first 8 parameters of the plugins, but we can assign these. I'm just kind of moving this around. But we can assign these to, if we click on the QC settings. Now, since it's a focus quick control, I could come over here and if we click on learn, I could say, okay, move whatever parameter you want. So say, okay, I want to adjust my threshold, and then we could assign those to our 8 quick controls. If I want to come over here, let's say, okay, I go to maybe an amp simulator. Now, when the amp is in focus and is the focused window, the focus quick controls will control the amp. When I make the compressor the focus, now as I move the 8 knobs, it's controlling that. So go through and kind of add a MIDI control. You could just do the 8 parameters that you want to use, and then those could be controlling any parameter that you want in your particular system for you. So great to see you on, Terry. All right. All right, Jay's question from Secret Studios. Hi, Greg. If 2 systems, one Cubase, one Nuendo, using VST System Link, I think, can the interfaces on both systems be used to engage interfaces I/O to access outboard gear for mixing / video? So many people will use VST System Link. If you're not familiar with it, is you could take a digital audio connection between 2 computers. So whether it's like an ADAT or SPDIF, ASEBU, and if you get to the studio setup, we could come over and we'll see that we could have VST System Link. And what VST System Link is, the concept was when it was developed that people would run out of computer resources to do a lot of tracks. And Charlie Steinberg kind of invented this. It was originally called CAT, Charlie's Awesome Technology. And what this would do is kind of very similar to how people would synchronize 2 24-track tape machines together, is this would take a digital audio connection between 2 computers and would sample accurately synchronize. So it would take one channel, the 24th bit, so just 1 bit of one channel, and it would use that to sample accurately synchronize different computers together. So as we are synchronizing computers, so we can think of it as primarily like syncing 2 computers together. So one computer may be doing video, one may be, and then it was expanded to do to send up to 256 MIDI channels of data. So if you had instruments that were loaded on computer B that you could access, you could send MIDI from computer A and host the instruments on computer B. So it's really kind of almost kind of like an instrument farm, but it's primarily like a synchronized, a way to synchronize two computer systems together, sample accurately. So can interfaces, so it's not really used, you can't really access and do routing on one computer to the other computer. It's just that digital audio connection is what is accessed. And it says, can you use the interfaces I/O to access outboard gear for mixing? You could, but the routing may be pretty complex for that. But I guess theoretically you could, and it would be sample accurate, so you could send tracks over and do, but you would need a way to get the audio from computer A to computer B as well. So if you have digital audio connections like ADAT light pipe, you could do it, but it may be a little tricky to do all the routing depending on your audio interface's routing capabilities. All right. All right, so we see Jazz Dude sharing some wisdom on VU meters. All right, so we see Louis Che just says, hello, Greg. Louis from Chicago here. Can you please go over to different settings of Cubase and studio setup, audio system in advanced? What do they do? Okay, so let's take a look. So let's go over our audio system. So when we see our audio system here, you may see it like this. Here we can see what the ASIO driver is, and we could adjust our control panel here and that brings up kind of the control panel of the audio interface. This is kind of outside of Cubase. It's actually kind of opening a third-party app, and this is often where we would set the buffers. So, and when we do this, we could see what our input-output latency is, what the ASIO guard latency is, our sample rate, and also if we have pull up and pull down. So that's kind of if you're doing post-production work or if you're composing for post-production, there's different ways to pull up and pull down the sample rate for syncing to time code. So when we go to the advanced options, we could choose our processing precision. Now, our processing precision is going to allow us to, Cubase VST has always been dealing with our audio engine at 32-bit floating point. And that's just kind of the precision of our audio engine. So if you're recording 24-bit audio and you want to add additional processing, you need to have kind of a higher level of precision for the processing than what the actual source is. Otherwise, you would degrade the source by adding effects. So if you record 24-bit audio, you'd want to have the processing precision at 32-bit floating point. And 7 or 8 years ago when Steinberg released the AXR interfaces, those were the first widely commercially available interfaces, I believe, that offered a 32-bit integer converter. And we can see these in the URC interfaces as well. So it's a 32-bit integer. So being that it's writing a 32-bit audio file, if you're working with that, then you could do all the processing precision at 64-bit. So you always want kind of a higher processing precision than the actual captured audio. So if we want to activate multiple processors, we would just simply activate multiprocessing, and we have ASIO guard. And what ASIO guard allows you to do is if we were running our system, let's say at a low buffer, 128, 64, not all channels that are just playing back need to necessarily be running at the low buffer. So what ASIO is, it's kind of a hybrid system so that the tracks that are currently actively armed or monitored, that they run in the lower resolution, the lower buffers, and the other tracks are just playing back run at a higher buffer rate. So that allows you to kind of have a hybrid, like a dual buffer kind of approach to it. So that's what ASIO does. Disk preload will just load up like the audio files into memory before it actually will play, so that it's, if you have slower hard disks, that it's, you're not, and this is, hasn't been relevant for a while, but if you had slower hard disk in the old days, they sometimes would have to spin up, and if you try to play back 100 tracks of audio and the hard drives were spinning up, this would allow you to preload some of the audio. As we have latency in the audio system, we could adjust for the record latency and be able to adjust, if we needed to adjust the number of samples. And then there's also the volume automation precision. So if you wanted the automation to be sample accurate, you could just adjust it directly there. So that's some of the different settings that you could access in the audio system in the normal and the advanced options. All right, wonderful to see Tiago checking in from Brazil. All right. All right, so we see from Channel Ripoff, says audio files go missing, like my favorite drum rolls for house music and kicks and claps and top loops, things I like baked into my template. That's the audio I'm talking about. So, it seemed like when we opened up this template, I'll close this project here. So if I had all of those set and we go to a new project and I just saved it within the template, so we'll go to more, and this is the July 1st, 2025. So the first one was just the piano, then the synth, then the drums, and then we added the audio loop. But right now when I open it up, we choose our folder, and then so let me know if your actual files are in the project window, Channel Ripoff, or if they're in like, a sample, like a sampler track or something like that. But we can see that, this audio file is automatically recalled with the particular template. So, but let me know if if that is kind of what you're doing with that. But it seems like the audio files are recalled with the template. All right. All right, so we see Terry Gray's having the same issues as I had the same issue when I set up snares in the sample track and put them in my template. They come up missing when I load them. Okay, so let's see if we'll do it in the sampler track. All right, so I'll just add a couple of sampler tracks here. Okay, so now we have these in our sampler track. Okay, so let's save as a template. Okay, we'll call this July 1st, 2025, 5. Okay. All right, so do new project. Here's our July 1st, 25th, July 1st, 2025, template 5. And now all of my samples are preserved with sampler tracks. So let me know if I'm doing something differently, and it could also maybe be there could be one preference. So if you go to like editing to audio, that when you go to import on import audio files, maybe try to toggle copy all files to project folder, but everything seemed to open up. But that could be a preference that might have an impact on it. Okay, so we have a question from Kamaljeet Singh. How can we play one of our one-shot samples like kick snare in our own key? Okay. So let's say I have, so if you want to, all right. So, just like we added here, so I'm going to add a sampler track. So let's come over here, let's just add sampler track. All right, so we have nothing in here. I'll go to my favorites. I have some snares in a one shot. I'll drag this over. Let me just undo that. All right, so now it's one shot and I can play it on any of the keys. So if you take if you have your audio file selected here in the media bay, you could right click and just say create sampler track. And so let me know if that's what you want to do. All right, so you see from Sven Isaacson said, I had supervision on the output of the control room. You're not doing anything wrong. You're reading the meters wrong. If you look at the meter in the left zone, as the left zone meter does. All right, so let me just go back to that project. Sorry, we have a big rainstorm coming in here. All right. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to open up supervision here. All right, so our channel here is set to 0 dB. I'll just make sure. Our master output is set to 0 dB on the channel. The plugin is set to output at -6 dB, so the test tone generator is at -6. And it's so this is at -6, so let me just All right, so it says I have supervision, output, and control room. You're not doing anything wrong. You're reading the meters wrong. If you look at the meter in the far left-hand zone, the far left zone meter does. Okay, so is it this meter? So this meter is showing -6, but let's see if we have our meters. All right, let me just go to the fader here. So is it these meters, Sven, that you're... So let me see if it's like a pan law thing. So I'm saying -6, -6, -6. Let me just adjust this. -6, -6. So maybe, Sven, if you could clarify for me, I'd appreciate it. All right, wonderful to see Mark Raven on, as Doc Stella is just came back from being off in the woods. All right, so you see channel ripoff says, thanks, Greg. Unfortunately, my audio files I keep on a track, so it's ready for me, are missing all the time, does not work. I have to go get them out of another project. So let me know if but it seemed like it worked for me with that. But let me know if I did anything differently than you did channel ripoff, and also, check to make sure, like when you open up the, let's say we go to the project here, we open a template. And come over here, let's look at the pool window. So we have our samples. And these samples are being referenced. So check to see where your path is on the audio in the pool for those particular files. But all my samples and the audio file came included. But maybe before you save the template, just out of curiosity, before you save the template, is just come over here and from the media menu and choose prepare archive, and that would place kind of all of the audio files into a common folder, and then save the template from there and see if that makes a difference. All right, everyone give a big woof to Mark Raven's dog Stella. All right, artist known as Loves giving a big woof to Stella. Okay. All right, so we have Cristobal checking in from Marbella. It says I have Mac M1 and a pair of NF KRK as main monitors, but I have a pair of Edifier M60 C-type connected. And I hear in the seconds has second sound reference. Let me just look up the Edifier real quick. Oh, sorry. Just switch my computer keyboard. Let me just look at the speakers. My other computer. All right, let me see if there's a wired connection. I see that they're wireless and Bluetooth. All right, so it looks like the speakers have aux inputs. So from your audio interface, what you want to do, so you don't want to run it wireless or Bluetooth, but you want to take, if you have an audio interface, let me just, so if you wanted to set it up, what you do is go into your control room. So we go to audio, to connections, and you go to your control room. So you want everything to always be kind of one unified audio clock. So it doesn't look like there's a way to clock those speakers externally. So, but it has an aux input. So what I would do is say, okay, we want to take outputs. You need an audio interface that has 2 outputs. Or like 4 outputs. So you'd say, okay, I want outputs 1 and 2 to go to my KRKs. And then we want to take outputs 3 and 4 of your audio interface here. And we want those to be going to a cable that connects to your Edifier speakers. Now, once you have those speakers configured in the control room, all you'd have to do is now switch between your KRKs and your Edifier speakers. So you could just come right here, but it's not going to work over Bluetooth. It's not going to work over USB-C. You would need to be sending it out from your audio interface. So your audio interface would need to have like 4 discrete outputs, and then you could just simply switch back and forth here. So that would be the best way to do it. Otherwise, if you did USB-C, you would have to come over here to your studio setup and switch the audio interface to your Edifier USB-C and then to your audio interface and kind of go back and forth. But if they're both coming out of the same audio interface, it's a matter of just coming here and saying, okay, I want to listen to my KRKs, I want to listen to Edifiers. So I have kind of, my setup is kind of 4 speakers. So I have like stereo, small stereo, mono, which is center channel, and 5.1 surround. All right. So we have a question, do we have a Korg M1 relative in Cubase Pro 14? So I wouldn't say that there are the Korg M1 sounds that are built in. There was a lot of joint development on the M1 with Yamaha for parts. Korg does offer an M1 as a plugin. You can, so a lot of Korg M1 sounds are very signature. If you were into keyboards at the time, it was kind of, name that Korg M1 patch on TV, on that jingle, on this show. It was so widespread, like around 89 to 91 or so. But there's no direct sounds, but Korg does sell an M1, VST instrument. You can have, if you want, we're kind of in the Yamaha camp, being that we're owned by Yamaha. So if you wanted to purchase like the FM Lab, you could get kind of all of your favorite FM sounds from the DX7 series. So to do that, if you want to see that, we could just add a quick instrument track. We'll go to like a Hallian Sonic, and you could actually import all the SysX from DX7 into FM Lab and have full kind of FM synthesis options right here inside. But that's an add-on sale for Cubase. So, but yeah, check out the Korg M1 plugins. I have the Korg VST instruments. I think they're really good plugins. So, but nothing directly inside of Cubase. All right, so we see a question. I always move pan unintentionally scrolling around with mouse. Would like to see a lock. Okay, so let's say if I'm here, I think that we can lock. Let's see, that's going to be, I think, volume, more, and position. But if you have the latest version of Cubase, if we come over, so let's say if we have our mix console here, so lots of people will come over and want to adjust the mix console. But if you go to the preferences or settings and you go to let's see, tool, let's see, where is it? All right, so if we come over here to editing, to controls, we'll see mouse wheel mode, changing the parameters, and this had changed in 1403. So if we want to disable in scrollable areas, so if I start to scroll from here, now we notice that the mouse can't adjust the parameter because it's an area that can scroll, but I can adjust, so we could just kind of come over here. And if you wanted that to be entirely disabled, again, go to editing, to controls, and you could just disable entirely so that your mouse wheel doesn't have an impact or make an unintended adjustment. So again, go to preferences or settings, to editing, to controls, and mouse wheel mode, and you have different options there that could fix that for you. All right, so we see from Al Will, just says that does make sense. Thank you, Greg. So you're welcome. Shagov25 says, for me, the difficulty is in matching the speed of the track to the acapella. So, it could really depend. So sometimes, acapellas aren't necessarily like, great parts for doing tempo detection because they're not rhythmically consistent, or so sometimes what you would need to do with like a vocal, if you wanted to match, if it's a pretty consistent tempo, we could just kind of come over, activate this, and if we go to like the warp grid mode, you could say, okay, from here to here is, like, let's say I start this at measure 7. All right. And I know that from here to here is roughly 1 bar. So let's say I go into my warp, and there's 3 different warp modes. And I say, okay, from here to there is 1 bar. And then that will give you kind of like a tempo. That could give you a rough tempo to kind of work with, but if the acapella is consistent or not. So try using the warp grid and just say, like, where you feel it's a bar, you can just kind of come over here and adjust, and that will give you kind of a quick reference. And as we can make our changes here, we can just kind of manually move the tempo as needed, or the bar to fall on the downbeat. All right, so we see from channel ripoff, it says, hey G, when trying to get the groove killer beat, really like using the hit points and creating MIDI from it, but only produces the note across the groove a better way. So if you have the spectral layers, which, you know, if you want to buy it now, you could get spectral layers, the update free. So let's say if I come over, I'll just create empty here quickly. Just get to my control room here. Sorry. All right, so let's say I have this beat. So if you're doing kind of the hit points to MIDI, that's really not intended for kind of like a full drum loop, especially as different elements will be on top of each other. That's like if you had a recording of like kick and snare and toms on different tracks for drum replacement. But if you wanted to take like a drum loop and break it apart, what we could do is, and if you have Spectral Layers Pro, and this is an add-on, but we could just come over here, say let's go to the track that's loaded into Spectral Layers. So now we do this as an array extension, and I'm going to, at this point, within Spectral Layers, bring this up just a little bit so we see, we'll go to, not allowing me, but there is an unmixed drums. I think I have Spectral Layers go. Let me just see if I can get my see if I may not have the license for it. It may run out. All right, see if I can get it activated here quickly. right, so let's see if I can. I may have to restart my Cubase. Let me just. But in Spectral Layers Pro, you can unmix the kick and snare and drag them over and then do it. So let me see if I could. Let me see if I could just open it in Nuendo real quick to show you. This may refresh it. All right, we'll see if this is going to open the full version. All right, so now what we could do is choose to unmix drums. We'll say apply. Then we're going to have our kick snare that we could just drag out. And I will choose just to quickly, we'll just bounce the selection of these two, replace, and now I could have the kick isolated from the snare. And at this point, we could go into the hit points. And then we could just come over and say, okay, we want to edit our kick hit points here. Let's adjust our threshold. And then we could make MIDI notes of just a kick, MIDI notes of the snare independently. So, but you would need to, like with Spectral Layers Pro, you could unmix the entire, the different elements of the drums. Whereas like the, you know, with the create MIDI from hit points, that's really designed for like a single element, like a kick or snare isolated on its own track. Sorry, I had to get the license sorted out for that. And everyone look forward to Spectral Layers 12 being released tomorrow. All right. Okay, so we see from Terry Gray says, hey Greg, I just created a new template with the Drum Sound Network, but when I created a new project based on the template, the drum sound I added in a template isn't copied to the new project. So when you do that, probably what you need to do is once you're in, like your, let me just activate this here. So let's say at this point I want to create a sampler track. Okay, and I have other audio files in. So if you want those all to be within the same folder, just come over and choose Prepare Archive from the Media menu, and then that will copy all of the different folders into the current, all the different audio files into the current project window. So just come over to your Media menu, Terry, and just choose Prepare Archive, and then you could verify by looking at the pool. If we do this, then all of the files, if you do Prepare Archive, will be placed into a common folder for you. All right, so we see Cristobal just says, okay, need an external hardware, thanks. All right, Mark Raven wants everyone to have 2 more likes. See, Val just saying he's going to demo the M1 VSTI. So a lot of times if you buy like a Korg Nano control, you often get like the M1 plugin free. So, you know, if you're going to spend $50 on it, maybe you get a controller and get the M1 plugin free of charge. All right, so we see from Roland stuff, silly simple question, please, Greg. Where can I set the monitoring dim level in a control room? I've got a brain cramp. I've completely forgotten. Thank you. All right, so we go to our control room. If you want to, you'll see under levels right here. So if you don't see, it's going to be in the main tab, and then there's like a little tab at the bottom for levels, and then here is where you could set your dim to. So if you want to just come right over there, so you could just, and if you want to set kind of like your known levels, like your known volume levels here, you could just come over, and so let's say this is your desired level, hold down, I think Alt or Option, and then you could set that and immediately go right to there. But probably your dim is going to be just set in the levels area. Okay, Mark Rabin asks, if I build a song from guitar and vocals, later adding drums, and I want the drums to follow tempo, do I set the drums to musical or clock? Other tracks clock musical in order to make it follow tempo. So probably if you had a guitar and vocal, I would set those to, you know, probably what I would do is just to lock those in time so that they don't move. And you don't want those tracks to be in those particular events to be in musical mode, because we don't want those to change. We want those to be kind of the basis and foundation for the other tracks. Now, the other tracks, when we want drums, if it's going to be like a drum loop, we would just simply place the event into musical mode, and we'd want the track to be in musical mode. And if it's just a MIDI event, you just need the track itself to be in musical mode, and then it will follow the tempo. Now, if you've recorded the guitar and vocals, it may not automatically follow until you do a tempo detection. So once you do a tempo detection of your recording, so let's say if I'm here, let's do a quick new project. So let's say this is kind of a rough guitar. So I want to kind of do a tempo detection of this.
There's a cool breeze blowing, chimney smoke in the air, chimney smoke in the air. The leaves are
And I'll just say let's divide by 2.
Think I saw God today. She was singing for change. She was clairvoyant, said, hey,
So once we have kind of the tempo detection,
there were a lot of plans. Just sort of melted away like
and so now once I have that tempo for the performance, if you didn't, now what I could do is, let's say we'll just put this into 4/4, and now I could have, let's just find like a percussion loop, or if I just want to even, let's say I'll just open up Groove Agent, and we'll just do the percussion agent here. And we'll just have this follow.
in the sand. Think I saw God.
So now this instrument is automatically going to follow, and if it was a loop, we would drag the loop in. Do something highly inappropriate here, and then put this loop into musical mode, and then
Breeze blowing, chimney smoke.
so you just take that loop into musical mode, otherwise, and then it's going to follow the tempo changes. But make sure that you actually have the tempo extracted of the original vocal and guitar part, and then everything can kind of be in musical mode to follow that, but you don't want the guitar and vocal to be in musical mode. So hope that helps. Okay, so we see from GC, says occasionally I'm not able to scroll horizontally or vertically in your range window with the mouse wheel parameter changes disabled. Any ideas? So let's say, I'll just check where my preference is. So let's say it's disabled. So if I'm here, it seems to be kind of scrolling. Let me just add a number of tracks. And just using my scroll wheel here, that seems to kind of work as expected. So let me know. Let me know exactly what you have for the preference. But here I have it set to disabled under editing controls, mouse wheel mode. All right, so Channel Ripoff asks, it says, I use synths a ton. As you can imagine, I open the filters, automation when I need to open sound. Can expression maps help me with that too? Thank you. So generally the expression maps are more designed for, like for orchestral instruments is really kind of the intention. So, when you're doing a string part, you may want long notes, short notes, pizzicato. If you wanted to have tremolo at whole tone or half tone, and allows you to switch between those different like key switches on samples, so that you have one sample but you may have 13 different articulations. So you think of the expression maps as being kind of more articulation control, but it's not necessarily as applicable for synths, I would say. All right. Okay, so you see Sven about the Metering just says looks like his full reply didn't come through yet. So if you want to send an email, take a look at it. All right, we see Joe from Rochester. Great to see you on. This is Can't Wait for Spectral Layers 12, so it'll be out tomorrow. Looking forward to it as well. All right, so we see from Sajan K says, I'm experiencing an issue exporting tracks. I do my usual select tracks, audio mix down, select destination, and okay, the files are in the destination, contain waveforms, and can be played in Cubase, but cannot be played in any other audio player nor Logic. The tracks are all audio tracks. So make sure that when you're exporting, make sure that when you're exporting, you do your export audio mix down, that you're not doing it as like a 64-bit or a 32-bit file. So, I think other programs should be, most media players aren't going to be able to play 32-bit float. Most DAWs, I would assume, could, or mastering applications, but make sure that when you export, that you're exporting it as like a 24-bit, and see if you have the same issues, or if it's only when you're doing a 32-bit or 64-bit float, because many programs don't have the capacity to play files at that high of a resolution. So check that out right there in the export as, in the bit depth, and also the sample rate. So if you're doing 192K, and you're trying to play back through iTunes or Apple Music or Windows Media Player, it may not work. But yeah, just check the bit depth. All right, so we see just kind of a follow-up from GC, who was asking about the scrolling issues. So it says, Greg, it's mainly when my cursor goes to tracks with items on them. It doesn't happen in every session, though. So one preference to check with that is come over here. Let's go to your preferences or settings and go to under editing. There's auto select events under cursor. So see if you disable that or toggle that, if that makes any difference. And this often allows you to, if you had a controller of some kind, so let's say if I'm here, let me just duplicate this event a couple times, so that if you had a controller and you were just kind of moving the jog wheel and you wanted to select a particular event for editing, you could come over to this and say, okay, auto select events under cursor. So now if I move kind of my playhead here to there, it would automatically select, and so we could select that from kind of driving it from an editor control surface. But see if that makes a difference. So again, under editing, auto select events under cursor. All right, so we're just seeing Jazz Dude saying 20 minutes left and no Friday hangout because it's a holiday here in the US. All right. We see Sajin K just says thanks, and GC says thanks, I'll try that. All right, I think we had another question. Just pop over. I may have accidentally closed. Let me just see if I can open it up one more time. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. Bear with me just a moment. right. Says, hi, Greg. Thanks for all you do in the Cubase live sessions and great information and support you provided to all us Steinberg end users. I have an issue that goes back to when I start in Cubase 8. I now have Nuendo 13. Whenever I use a solo function, solo in place while running automation on the project, I get other tracks playing that aren't soloed. This happens even when there are no groups or effects on the tracks. This needs to be brought up to Steinberg. Sure, there's workarounds like the listen option, but it would be great if solo would work properly along with automation. Thanks, Gabriel. All right, so let's take a look, see if we could recreate this. I'll just do... Alright, so let's say I'll just do some automation on my tracks here. Alright, I think I have some automation on the bass. So let's say, come over here, let me just... Alright, so we're just writing a lot of automation. Alright, so let's say... Alright, so we solo tracks. Alright, so let's say if I solo my guitar here. Alright, now let's come over, and I think if I hold down Command, we'll do... Let's say if I have my guitar soloed here. And now I do an exclusive solo by holding down Control or Command. Let me just get my key command. All right. Alright, so let's just do... Alright, so we can see that we have kind of lots of automation going on here. So I'm going to say take the bass, I'm going to hold down my Option key so we get... Alright, so we have, let's say, drum automation going on here. So let's say I had these tracks also soloed, and then... So I've seen people kind of complaining about this online. I've seen it mentioned on forums, but let me know if I'm doing anything differently. It looks like everything is functioning as expected. So I have like mute automation going on. I have track automation going on here. So let's say I have, let's say, my guitars, bass soloed. And then I want to go to my kick here. So it doesn't seem like anything else is unsoloing, but if you have a project that you want to send Gabriel, like that it's misbehaving on, I'd be happy to take a look at it for you. And you could send it a link, a download link to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. All right, so we see from Roland Stuff says, thanks for starting out my control room monitoring, Greg. Brain is now back in gear. So that's good. All right, we'll see if there's, I think we're out of mailed in questions. Looks like we reached the end of questions on the live stream here, but we'll see if there's anything else that comes up, and there's usually about 20 seconds from when I speak to when you guys hear it, depending on the latency of the stream. And once again, because of a holiday in the United States, we won't be doing the live stream on Friday, but we will be resuming our normal schedule of Tuesday and Friday starting next week, and we should do that for the rest of the summer. I don't think I have any travel plans coming up for that or work trips, but we'll see if there's any other questions that sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up a couple minutes early. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trophies from Michael Teams. Thank you. All right. And we see people, Val and Channel Ripoff, wishing everyone happy 4th of July. And once again, we'll send a happy Canada Day to our Canadian viewers. So I know we have Peter on and Fly V. So we see Sajan K just says, thank you, Greg, that worked. All right. All right. All right, so we see a question from Observation Audio. Hi from Hollister, California. Greg, is there a way to change the off, near, mid, and far of the individual channels in a group object track? All right, so let's take a quick look. Okay, so let's come over here. Okay, so I think, let's see if we could do this. Some of the things we can't necessarily do in kind of Atmos. A lot of times within panners, yeah, so it might be if you're doing Atmos, it might be kind of fixed where they always have to be present because it's doing kind of object based. But usually if we were doing, let's say, a panner, so if it's not kind of Atmos based, so I'm assuming it's Atmos based or immersive if you're doing an object track. But usually if we go to your audio connections here, let's get to your output. And let's say if I had a 5.1 output and I add an audio track and it's routed out to the 5.1 out. But it might be, since we're dealing with that, so let's say if you do like just a standard 5.1 panner, then I think it's Alt or Option that you could turn off different ones, but I think you may not have that option with dealing with objects if it's for Atmos. But I could do some more research on it if you want to email me. All right, at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we see John A. Walker's just hoping everyone's well, is remastering at the moment. We'll tune in again. And we see from observation audio, you can do it with a bed track within the ADM, but not a group. You can do it in Dolby Atmos renderer. So, yeah. There's a lot of limitations and not as flexible configurations when dealing with Atmos routing and stuff like that. All right, we'll see if there's any other questions that sneak in. All right, looks like maybe we got through all of the questions today. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions, and if you've learned a new tip or trick today, make sure that you subscribe to the channel and hit the thumbs up and like the live streams. Appreciate all the great questions, and always feel grateful that I get to help people realize their creativity. And I want everyone to stay safe and healthy. If you're in Canada, please enjoy a wonderful Canada Day. And for all people in America, have a wonderful 4th of July holiday and weekend. And we will see everyone back on Tuesday of next week. Thank you very much. Goodbye.